But I cannot, for the life of me, understand why we let prisoners out to go home for Christmas. Joining me now with his thoughts on this, to my mind, strange situation, is a former London cop of 31 years' experience and director of the Law and Order Foundation, Norman Brennan. Morning, Norman.
Yeah, good morning, Kevin.
I just think I can't get my head around this. What do you think, that they're letting 2,000 prisoners out? It's going to happen apparently this year as well, despite the lockdown.
Well, the thing is, these are not Category A, Category B prisoners. They're 4 prisons, so I understand it, mainly, that are all open prisons. This always has a truck with the public and victims of crime, for the simple reason is a number of these offenders have actually stolen their Christmas presents. They've stolen jewellery. They've stolen all sorts of things. There are drug offenders as well, sex offenders. The prison service say that rigid scrutiny is put in place. But my view has always been is if you want to spend Christmas at home with your loved ones and family, don't offend. If you don't offend, nobody's got a problem with that at all. What I think should be considered as well is whether the offender actually pleaded guilty or whether they
that's a good point. Yeah.
Or whether they put victims and witnesses through a very traumatic trial, because giving evidence, even for police officers, is a bit of an ordeal, let alone victims and members of the public that have never set foot inside a court before. But I do agree that it has to be rehabilitation, but these sort of headlines always cause a lot of grief, especially at Christmas. And this Christmas, not as I suppose it should make any difference, is even worse because many families can't even see each other or are limited to numbers of people at funerals, let alone anything else.
Yeah. Of the 1,909 inmates that were let out for Christmas last year, 32 were sex offenders, 752 were drug criminals, and 436 were inside for violent offences. So the type of prisoners that are getting allowed home strikes me as being some sort of cause for concern. But I think what worries me more is just the way that this country, that government after government likes to say we're tough on crime. And you and I have discussed at length the fact that we're not really, because when we sentence someone for 10 years, we mean 5 years, and then with good behaviour, they'll do about 3. And then we find out that in the middle of you serving your very, very much shortened sentence to what you were given in court, you go home for Christmas. This isn't very tough on crime, is it?
It isn't. You're speaking to somebody that has spent the last 42 years on Law and Order and in Law and Order. 31 as a police officer and about 25 years as a campaigner. I meet homicide families, I've dealt with victims, I've dealt with the criminal justice system. And the sad reality is I've probably got one of the lead voices in Britain on Law and Order. Some people are not happy with that because I criticise chief constables occasionally. I criticise the criminal justice system. My point is this. I have no faith in our criminal justice system. As somebody that campaigns for victims, as someone that has been part of the criminal justice system, I repeat again, I have no faith in the criminal justice system. The reason why I speak to you, Kevin, and many other people in the media and continue to campaign is victims need a voice.
Yep.
They need a champion, and I'm one of their champions. There are many other people to speak out on Law and Order. But what does it say when someone can come on your programme that you would expect to be positive on Law and Order, says I've no faith? Well, if I've no faith, and I've had decades in the criminal justice system, is it hardly surprising that victims and the law-abiding public, when they see such headlines, just put their hands over their face and think, how much worse is it going to get?
Yeah, and if to go back to this being let out for Christmas situation, some of these people who are being let out are killers. They're murderers. And if you were the relatives or the friends of the people, the victims, and you knew that the person who killed your loved one is busy having a lovely time with his or her family over Christmas, that's not going to make you too thrilled, is it?
Well, it isn't. That there's no worse crime that you can commit than homicide. It's where you've actually taken someone's life, and many of the victims' families never there's no sentence that could ever justify what they've done. But you're right. I mean, their lives will never ever be the same. Most families, or all families that have had a loved one murdered, never enjoy Christmas. They can't wait for Christmas to be gone. They don't enjoy holidays. They don't enjoy Sundays because it's like a day of relaxation. And often for them, the relaxation is remembering that they've lost someone. And at Christmas, when some of them just listen to music, they don't have Christmas trees often unless they've got children, and they just exist. To know that somebody that has killed their loved one is at home having a jolly up with his family before he goes back to prison really rubs their nose in it. And I sort of say back to how we started this. If you want to spend time with your family and loved ones at Christmas, don't commit crime. You've highlighted, Kevin, that many offenders get woefully weak sentences, and they only serve half of that, and then they're moved to an open prison very quickly. And many of these are persistent habitual offenders. So again, the caveat to what I said earlier on, if you have many previous convictions, if you put the victim and their family and witnesses through the ordeal of a trial by pleading not guilty when you were clearly guilty, then no way should you be spending Christmas at home. You think about what you put that victim's family through, and the others that, have committed a crime, and we have to have rehabilitation. Hopefully they will realise the value of having family and the devastation that they have committed others. And when they come out of prison, they don't reoffend. If you do, again, you're not released for Christmas.
I think, Norman, I know why you're so passionate about this, because unlike me and anyone else who hasn't worked for the police, you know the effect that having a loved one murdered has on people. I mean, I don't think people ever take into account enough the sheer shattering devastation of that happening to you, that your brother, your sister, your son, your daughter. I mean, try to, if you can, sum up what it's like dealing with having to talk to people who've just had a close relative murdered.
Well, I've met over 1,000 individual families over the past 40 years. I represent Myra Hindley victims' family, Denise Bolger, James was murdered, Sarah Payne, Damilola Taylor, plus hundreds of others whose names are not as so well known. All of them suffer the same. And I posted this morning on my Twitter feed. Last night, the latest murder victim was a 59-year-old man in Coulsdon near Croydon. Mm-hmm. And I posted there, the police have gone round and they've had to they've had to tell a loved one or loved ones that their relative has been murdered. That body will then be taken to a mortuary, laid on a slab. A string will be put round the big toe with a number and a name on it. Yeah. And within 24 hours to 36 hours, a post-mortem will be carried out. You'll have to get the death certificate. And instead of planning and looking forward to Christmas, getting back to the point, you'll be planning a funeral. There for you, time stops and life changes forever. Yes. That is what the victims go through. And that is why no day will ever be the same for them. For them, they will be bereft. And all this business about closure at court is just a word. It's just words, closure. There is never closure for the victims. Of course, the court case is over. Sometimes their loved one has been murdered and the person they know is guilty has walked free from court. That's even worse. But in answer to your question, for these families, nothing can ever bring back a loved one. Their lives will never, ever be the same. And when they look up and see the television headlines or read the story in the Daily Mirror where this came from and see that someone that possibly murdered their loved one will be home at Christmas enjoying turkey, having a laugh and a joke, it just makes their Christmas a lot worse and makes them feel, just actually brings back all the dreadful memories.
Yeah, and I just think that I don't want to be too harsh. I do understand the concept of rehabilitation. You have to ease even long-term prisoners back into real life, but I just think it doesn't console the victims, the relatives of the victims of murders and violent crimes, that the people who perpetrated these crimes are let home for Christmas. I think it's a bad message. Can I ask you, Norman, before you go, on a more general basis, I mean, these are strange and unusual times, but what did you think? And of course, the police have to administer the law. I'm not blaming them for this. But what did you think about that gym owner in Liverpool who defied the Tier 3 lockdown in that city, desperate to make a living, kept his gym open? Now, I understand the police would have to go around and say, I'm sorry, you're breaking the rules. But did it require 8 officers with guns?
Well, let me just put that story correct, as the Chief Constable did. The officers were not armed. They had tasers. There again, the majority of officers have tasers now. The police, don't forget, are the enforcers of the law.
Yeah, no, I understand that.
Yeah, the government lay down their laws and the police have to carry it out. We can all say personally, should that really have happened? I mean, how many officers do you know? Maybe that was a carrier of officers that were attending call after call after call and were required with the numbers, you know as well as I do, in London and other places. After lockdown, hundreds of people will gather, and in gyms there are dozens of people. And if you looked at the photos as I did and the video, all of the officers were standing basically with their arms across each other, not aggressive, not confrontational.
No, I concede that. Yeah.
You know, they told him the reason. The thing is, Kevin, people are dying. We have top surgeons, we have top scientists telling the country, for God's sake, work with us, not against us. Yes, there's going to be some horrible times for months to come, but if we all obey the law and don't put too much pressure on the police and do as you're told, hopefully sometime next year we get out this mess. And unfortunately, the police are caught in the middle. Do you really think they wanted to be at that gym? Of course they didn't. In fact, they wanted to book off duty and get down the gym and keep fit themselves.
Well, except they're not allowed to, of course, in Liverpool. But on a general basis, I mean, of course, you know, the police have to do what they have to do, and they're. I'm concerned that so much police time is now being taken up by having to sort of get people out of pubs and look after them on the street as they continue to drink after being booted out of the boozer. I think it's all a horrible waste of police time. But I do still think, generally speaking, that the police can often get their priorities wrong. And one area, again, lastly, I've got to ask you this. This, to my mind, Norman, is a massive waste of police time. Did you see the story about Darren Grimes, the journalist who asked the question to David Starkey, the historian, and received a racist answer? He is now being investigated by the police. Now, a journalist, if I asked you a question now and you said something, you would never do that, I know, but suppose you did say something racist, you know, that's not my fault. Surely the police have better things to do than investigate that. So my real thrust of the question is, why are the police quick to jump on this kind of case when they're not investigating burglaries, attacks in the street, cars being stolen, the kind of things that people want them to do?
I mean, if you're my blunt answer, the police would prefer to be on their own divisions, meeting the public and victims and protecting society within their own areas, rather than being dragged onto squads having to investigate these issues. The thing is, though, Kevin, if a crime is reported, it has to be investigated, because if you don't investigate it, the police are not doing their job. Yeah. Then they'd be reported by the lefties and the woke brigade for failing.
You're right about that.
and I speak to police all the time, and I can't tell you the language that some of them use and the frustration they are. But believe you me, they're more in touch with the public than what some of the public think. But the thing is, they have a duty to do, and there won't be lots of people investigating this. It'll probably be down to a detective, and let's hope that it is resolved. And if it just needs words of advice or no further action, let's ensure that happens, and let's move on, and let's stop making unnecessary, frivolous complaints. And how about everybody start working together for a change? Because if the politicians did that and the public started saying hello and good morning and looking out for each other, throughout these dreadful times, we can look back and say, what a horrible year that was. But you know what? We actually get on better together now. And even the police that we sometimes don't like, do you know what? They really were friendly, even when they gave us a kick up the backside.
It's not the frontline officers. It's not coppers that what we people like me and I think you worry about. It's these senior coppers who do seem to see themselves as the sort of woke police, who've got to enforce the law of the woke warriors. Sort of right on coppers. And that's what worries me. That they get their priorities wrong. But that's probably a discussion for another day, Norman, and I'm sure we'll have it. I thank you so much for your time. Wise words as always. Thank you, mate. That's Norman Brennan, retired London police officer of 31 years standing and director of the Law and Order Foundation.